In this lesson, we're going to review conditional formatting as a function within Microsoft Excel. By the end of this lesson, you should feel comfortable to be able to apply multiple different conditional formats on tables. We're going to go through multiple examples within this lesson, and you'll be able to apply a number of different formats to any data table that you're working in your analysis. Conditional formatting is a way in which you can highlight certain cells with a color or icon depending on the cell's value within a table. And this is beneficial if you want to draw attention to specific data that meets certain criteria that you develop within a data table. So let's start by looking at a very basic example, that is highlighting cells less than a specific dollar amount within a table. So in our example here, we have a sales report for January 2017, and we would like to highlight the sales that are less than $4 million. So the steps that you need to take in order to do that are as follows. First, you would select the row or column that you want to format and apply the conditional formatting to. The second thing that you want to do is click the Home button, which is in the top ribbon here, and then click on Conditional Formatting. Highlight Cell Rules, and then click on Less Than. And when you do that, an option is going to appear where you can input a dollar amount. So that's where you'd want to enter the $4 million as your threshold, and then you can choose what color you want to apply the fill or do a custom format to anything that meets that criteria. So as you can see, down here is our table. Right here above the table are just the steps that you need to apply, just summarizing the different steps associated with applying the conditional formatting in this case. So if you want to apply the conditional format to this data table, you don't actually want to click and highlight the entire data table, because I'll show you what that's going to do. If we now click conditional formatting, highlight cell rules less than a specific dollar amount, that dollar amount's now actually going to apply to the entire table. And that's not the goal upon which what we want to achieve here. We wanted to just find and highlight the transactions that had a sales value less than $4 million. We don't want that $4 million to be applied to the other columns as well. So in order to achieve our goal, what I'm going to do here first is I'm going to select the table, remove any conditional formats that already exist in the table. And to do that, I'm going to click on Conditional Formatting, and then I'm going to click on Clear Rules, and then Clear Rules from Selected Cells, because we've got them highlighted. Now I'm ready to apply the conditional formatting to the sales value column. So I'm going to click on the header for sales value. I'm going to press and hold Control Shift and click down to highlight it all. Then I'm going to click on Conditional Formatting, highlight Cell Rules, click on Less Than, type in $4 million, and I'm going to select Light Fill with Dark Red Text. I'm going to click OK, and now, as you can see, any values that are less than $4 million in the sales value column are highlighted in red, which is exactly what I wanted. Now keep in mind, I could apply a different conditional format in a different column here. So let's say I wanted to highlight any trade price that was less than $2 million in column K. I could do that in this column just by highlighting this entire column. Again, I'm going to press and hold Control and Shift, press the down arrow, and then I'm going to scroll back up, click on Conditional Formatting, click Highlight Cells and Rules, and this time I'm going to specify less than $2 million. And I'm going to light fill with, actually I'm going to choose something different this time. I'm going to green fill with dark green text, just to provide it with some different formatting. The reason why I did this is because it actually has a different threshold applied. And I think if you're going to apply conditional formatting to a specific data table, it makes sense to have a legend somewhere above or below the table, preferably above, because unless someone's going to scroll to the bottom of the table and review it, they may overlook that legend. And I think what you want to show in the legend is just what the highlights mean. So you could have a legend that showed green, and you could say highlights in green mean this is less than a couple $1 million of trade price. And then alternatively, for the sales value, you could put less than $4 million here. And you could have a red fill as part of the legend here. Obviously the colors are not exact here, but what I would do is just title this as legend, get the colors to be exact. And that way anyone who's reviewing the table would know what they're looking at and what these conditional formats mean. So I'm going to delete that. And let's move on to another example down here for icon sets. In this example, we have a sales report for January 2017, and we would like to indicate beside the sales values certain symbols depending on whether they are at a satisfactory level or not based on the following conditions. So the conditions, similar to the last example, are $4 million. And so if it does exceed or is at $4 million, we actually want to place a check mark. If it's less than $4 million but greater than $3 million, I want to show an exclamation mark. And finally, if it's less than 3 million, I want to show a mark with an X. And so I think this is helpful because this is a different type of legend that we could apply to a data set as part of the conditional formatting. Some people have a preference of using colors. Other people would prefer to show certain icons, both of which are options in Microsoft Excel. So let's take a look at the data table and figure out how we're going to apply this conditional formatting with icons. Well, the first step is to select the row or column that you want to format. Then again, you're going to click the Home and Conditional Formatting icon sets. And if you look at the screen here, it shows where that is in the dropdown. So you go to Conditional Formatting, you click on Icon Sets, and there's a variety of icon indicators and directional and shape icons that appear. So it's really up to you what you want to choose. I'm going to choose the indicator icon set in this case, and I'm going to use the green check mark, the yellow exclamation mark, and the red X button. As we scroll down, we can see what would appear next is the Conditional Formatting Rules Manager, which allows you to apply the icon set to the specific table. And so if we click OK on that, the next thing that appears is it asks you what criteria you want to apply in order to, set the rules. And so you'd modify the rule based on your preferences. In our example, we can change the icon sets and thresholds. And in this image here, it shows the thresholds are based on percentage thresholds, but they can actually be switched to numerical values. As you can see here, the type that was preset is %. But again, you can change that to a dollar amount, or just keep it as a percentage if you wanted to show these icons in the top 67% and have something else shown when it's between 33 and 67% and a different value when it is in the lower 33 percentile of the table. However, in our example, in this table, I actually want to use hard dollar amounts, and so let's go ahead and attempt that. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to highlight the entire sales value column here. And again, I'm going to go to the top navigation pane. I'm going to click on Home. Then I'm going to click on Conditional Formatting. And if I click on Icon Sets, I'm going to choose the indicators here for check mark, exclamation mark, and the X. Now, those are applied. I'm actually going to specify the rules here. So if I click on the conditional formatting and I clear the rules from these cells, I can then go back and apply the icon set and edit the rules. So I'm going to click on Manage Rules. And as you can see, there is an option here to edit the rule. So I'm going to click on Edit. And what I want to do here is I'm actually going to modify the rule type to have a hard dollar amount. So what I want to do is I want to show a check mark if the sales value was greater than $4 million. Let's say that's a satisfactory threshold per the executive management at the company. And by the way, you can use a greater than and equal to, a greater than or equal to sign here, or a greater than sign. In this case, I want to apply the threshold to anything that is greater than or equal to. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a number for the second threshold, and I'm going to choose greater than $3 million here. And what's going to happen now is anything that's less than $3 million is going to be marked as an X. Anything that is greater than 3 million but less than 4 million is going to have an exclamation mark. And anything that's greater than $4 million is going to have a check mark. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click OK. And then again, I'm going to apply it and I'm going to click OK. And now you can see that the values have been updated with their appropriate icons beside them. So as you can see, something with a $4 million sales value has a check mark. An item that is greater than 3 million but less than 4 million has an exclamation mark, as you can see here. And anything less than $3 million, i.e. rows 230, 231, and 232, have an X. Let's move on to example number 3, highlighting the bottom 10 sales amounts. So as you started to realize, there's lots of different ways, and you can play around with them too, but there's lots of different ways you can use conditional formatting in a table. And I really like the fact that Excel has a lot of these presets built in. The next time you create a data table, I would suggest taking it one step further and think about whether or not it would make sense to apply conditional format to the data table before you send it off to someone for review or for someone's consideration. Because if you're sending someone a big data table, they may not know what certain data means, what's good, what's bad, what meets certain thresholds. And by applying certain icon characteristics or certain threshold conditional formats, it makes it a lot easier for the end user or viewer to be able to distinguish between what's good, what's bad, what's neutral. So in this example, let's assume that we want to highlight the bottom 10 items in a table based on the sales amount. Again, in order to do that, we just click on the row or column and highlight it. And we'd go to the home button in the top navigation ribbon, click on conditional formatting, and there's an option to conditional format the bottom 10 items. When we do that, a pop-up appears and it asks us how many items we want to format. And in this case, we choose 10, and we can set the color fill to however we'd like. In this case, we used green. So let's go through that in an example here. I'm going to highlight column M in this table, hold Control-Shift, press the down button, and I'm going to clear the formats from the selected cells. So there's no more conditional format on that cell. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply my conditional format. So I'm going to click on conditional formatting, top, bottom rules, click on bottom 10 items, choose 10, and I'm going to choose green fill with dark green text. So I find that this is a very handy function within Excel, because if I didn't have that conditional formatting function available and I wanted to find the lowest 10 items, what would I have to do? First of all, what I'd have to do is sort it and then figure out what the bottom 10 are. But if I didn't want to sort it, I'd have to use a conditional if formula, a nested if or an ifs, and that would just be an unproductive use of my time. Another thing that I can do now that I've got the bottom 10 items is I can just highlight this entire data table. And now that I know that the bottom 10 items are highlighted in green, the only thing I need to do in order to draw further attention to them and just summarize them is to filter the table. So I can apply the filter by going to the sort and filter section of the top nav bar, clicking on filter, and click the drop down for sales value. And now an option appears where I can filter by color. I can click the green color from the options, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the bottom items in the table. So as you can see, there are 16 items here in the table. You might be asking yourself, well, why are there 16 items in this table? I thought there were only supposed to be 10. Well, the reason is because Excel's not going to randomly pick the bottom one if there's multiple bottom items. And in this case, there are multiple items with $1 million value. There's actually 7 of them. So how do we know that? Well, let's count them. So how many exist at 1.2 million? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then the last one that Excel wanted to find was the bottom. Since we specified the bottom 10, it needs to find one more value, but it can't find one more value. It actually finds several at 1 million, and therefore it returns the result for all of those 1 million. But what would happen if I were to clear the filters here, change some of these values so that there's not so many at the same dollar threshold? Well, let's try that. Let's try adding some dollar amounts to these values. So I'm going to add a couple dollars here and there to these values so that they're more unique. And we're going to see what the conditional formatting function returns as a result here. I'm going to clear filters. And as you can see, the conditional formatting automatically updates as I update the sales values. So if I now filter by color, how many values do I get here? I get only 10 items in the table. And the reason why it's only 10 items is because they're all unique. And Excel is able to easily identify the bottom 10 amounts. I'm going to clear the filters here, and let's move on to the next conditional formatting example here, example number 4. In example number 4, we're going to review highlighting the sales amount with a data bar based on the relative weight. So let's assume we want to highlight all the sales amounts and show a progress bar within the cell representing the value relative to other values. Again, in order to do this, it's very similar to applying conditional formatting across the board. Conditional formatting exists in one central location in Excel, and it's just in that home ribbon under conditional formatting. And then you can click on data bars and then choose a color fill based on your preferences. In this case, we used an orange. And let's go through it. So let's assume we want to apply a progress bar based on the relative weight of the sales values in column M. I'm going to highlight column M, Control Shift down, and then I'm going to go to conditional formatting. I'm going to clear the rules from the selected cells. I'm going to go back to conditional formatting, and I'm going to apply data bars. Okay, and under data bars, you can use a gradient fill or you can use a solid fill. My preference is to use a solid fill, but it's entirely up to you. That's just an aesthetics thing. If I click on the solid fill for blue, green, red, etc., it doesn't make any difference in terms of how far out or how far in the data bars are presented. It just changes the color. So let's click on the blue here. There's nothing further that you really need to do. But just to illustrate how this works is if you look down here, it really gives you a good visual of the relative value of a particular cell. And so here you can see $7 million is completely filled with blue. That suggests it's probably the largest value in column M. And just by quick glance, I can tell that it is. On the other hand, it looks like $1 million is the lowest amount in column M, and therefore it has a slight amount of color in its cell. Meanwhile, cells that are half filled are at 3.5 million, which is half of 7 million, which makes sense. And so that's just a great illustration of presenting data in its relative weight compared to other values in a data set. And it may be something that you want to build into your data table in the future when you're preparing a financial analysis. Let's move on to example number 5 here, highlighting based on color scales. So let's assume that we want to highlight all of the cells in the sales value column with a color scale based on the relative weight of the number. Again, we go to the home ribbon conditional formatting, and then in this case, we'd click on color scales. As you can see, there's a lot of presets here. You can also click on more rules, but if you just want to use the presets, they're available, quick and easy. And it's very similar to the way we did the last conditional formatting above for the data bar using relative weights. Instead of using the data bar, we're now using color scales, and it's going to fill the entire cell. And what it's going to do is it's going to just use a different shade of color and make the ones that are higher in value have a more prominent weight, and the ones that are lower in value will have a less prominent weight of color, and they'll appear closer to the background color, in this case, the background color being white. And so, as you can see here, the dark green items are filled for the values that are larger. Let's go down to see the value that's $7 million in this table. There it is. It's filled with dark green, and an item that has $1 million is not filled at all because that's the lowest value. Something that's in the lower percentiles is not filled. If you can take a look at the 1.2 million, it's got a very faint fill. Let's look at something around 2 million. That's got a partial fill of green as well, but it's not very prevalent. And so it just provides a good overall context of the relative weight of a value within the column. Let's go ahead and highlight the entire column. Let's say I want to change the color of the fill. If I want to change the color of the fill for this color scale, I can highlight it all, go to conditional formatting, click on color scales, and let's say I want to use multicolors here. I'm going to choose the red and the blue. So there's obviously a few different ways you can do this. The reds are the ones with the higher dollar amount. The blues have lower dollar amounts because they're colder. So I guess the theory here is one's cold and one's hot. If I go back to conditional formatting and color scales, I can apply all of them in red, or I can choose more rules and really customize the look and feel based on different colors that I want to apply. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to go back and I'm going to use the color scale of green. Let's move on to the final example here, example 6. In this example, we want to insert icons based on another cell's value. So let's assume we want to track, as an example, the delivery status of our vehicles to customers in an Excel spreadsheet and denote completed deliveries with a green flag and pending deliveries with a red flag. This can be achieved with an icon set based on another cell's value, in this case, the delivery date. And this is a really cool feature in Microsoft Excel. Take a look at this table here. Below is the result of the formatting with the delivery status flags in the first column. So as you can see here in this table, anything that has a delivery date and has been delivered shows up with a green flag. Anything that has not been delivered and doesn't have a delivery date shows up with a red flag. So that's just another way to illustrate the power behind Microsoft Excel and the flexibility and be able to present data and show it in a meaningful context. So let's take a look at the steps here on how we want to use the delivery status icon set and the flags within Microsoft Excel. So what we're doing here is we're using a formula, and after setting a formula in the delivery status column, we're changing the conditional formatting to use an icon set based on another cell's value. So if you take a look at the formula in cell C643, the formula reads as follows. If cell E643 is not equal to blank, then return a 3, otherwise return a 1. Now, what do the 3 and the 1 mean? Well, 1 is for red flag, 2 is for yellow flag, and 3 is for green flag. So in this case, because cell E643 is not blank, it's going to return a green flag. If it were blank, it would return a red flag because of the 1. Alternatively, I can change the color of the icon. I can make the delivery date show up with a yellow flag if I put in a 2. As you can see, the delivery status flag changes to yellow if I wanted it to, but I'm going to go back and change it to a green. In the second row here, we see that there's a Cadillac with no delivery date, and therefore the formula returns a 1, which is false, and therefore it's going to return the red flag. So how do we get the flag to appear? Well, the first step is highlighting the cells in the column where you'd like to place the icon set, in this case the delivery status column. The second step is inserting the formula into the cell for delivery status. And let's go back to cell C643 where we've got the formula written out. In this case, we wrote if E643, which is delivery date, is not equal to a blank, then return a 3, otherwise return a 1, and cell E643 is a delivery status date column. The 3 represents if true, and there is a delivery date entered. On the other hand, if there's no delivery date, a 1 will be entered by the formula. So we started off by putting in the formula in the delivery status column. We have some product information in the next column, and we've got our data with respect to the delivery date in the column E in the table as well. Highlighting the delivery status column, we can go to Conditional Formatting, and then we can click on Icon Sets. We can choose the desired indicator. In this case, it's the flags. And then if we go back to Conditional Formatting and Icon Sets, we can click on Manage Rules. And let's just edit the rule. So when I go to edit the rule, I have a number of different options here. Again, I'm going to use the icon set. I'm going to use the flags. I can actually set the order upon which I want these to appear. But in this case, I want a green flag to be at the top. I want a yellow to be in the middle and a red to be at the end. In this case, I'm just using 2 icons, the green and the red. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the percent type to number. And what I would like to do is use the greater than or equal to for green and make it a 3. If it has a 1, i.e. a blank in the delivery date, then I want to show a red flag. If I actually make it greater than 1, that should work because these ones here are just 1. They're not greater than 1. So I'm going to apply that. It changes them back to red. And now I have my delivery status flags all set up. So the other thing I want to do is I only want to show the icons. I don't want to show the numbers in the value fields. It's just for presentation purposes, doesn't make sense to show both. And so the way in which I can just show icons is by going back to managing the rules. If you've already got a rule set up, just try to manage the rule. I can edit the rule here. The only thing I need to do is click Show Icon Only, click OK, click Apply, and just like that, the delivery status column shows the colored icons for the flags and does not show the numbers beside them. So hopefully that's a useful conditional formatting tip that you'll be able to apply in your analyses in the future. Hope you enjoyed watching this lesson and learned a few things. Hey guys, thanks for watching this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe from you. And if you want to learn more about Microsoft Excel, check out these videos above. And don't forget to check out our website, commercecurve.com, where we have lots of in-depth finance and accounting courses available with full training workbooks. All of our courses come with complete workbooks of lessons, examples, pre-built financial models, and training video. Hope to see you there.